and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns podcast for March 15th, 2025. My name is Tom Luongo. We have a lot to talk about. It is episode 210, and I have with me returning guest Kris Sims of the Canadian Taxpayers Association is here because we're going to talk about now newly instantiated, or whatever the word is, Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, who was literally just, as we were hitting record, was just I don't know what's the word we're looking for. Inaugurated, sworn in. Thank you. That's the word we're looking for. So, Kris, how are you? How you been? Looking forward to seeing you in Calgary at Sean's Cornerstone conference in 2 months, and lovely to see you today. So good to see you again. How are you?
Likewise, it's nice to see you, and thanks for checking in on us. That's nice of you.
I am still at heart really a hardcore libertarian who believes in as many countries as possible, because more countries meaning more distributed power meaning less war, less, or more, at least less organized, potential global war. And so I like the idea of stealing Alberta from Canada. I think that's a great idea, and especially if you look at the United States with Alberta drawn in, it's like a big middle finger to the globalists. It's like perfect. Right? So
You're coming at this at a tender moment, because things are a little funny up here right now. It's funny, before you hit record, folks who are listening, he said, "How are you?" And I think my answer was like nervous laughter. So because
well, I was being polite. To be honest with you, I was being polite because I was actually answering an email at the same time. I'm like, well, to fill space, hello, Kris, how are you? She's like, I'm like, okay, that was a loaded question. I'm sorry. How are you bearing up? I think it's a better question.
Yeah, so things are not great, and especially for your American listeners who I'm pretty sure you guys have elections for like your dog catchers there. Like, you're very democratic. That's pretty awesome. So up here in Canada, literally like a few seconds ago, Mark Carney was just sworn in as the Canadian Prime Minister. Here's where it gets weird. Definitely from an American perspective or a Republican perspective. Mark Carney has never once been elected to the Canadian Parliament. So this is historical. This has never happened before. So at different times, yes, there's been a moment where, say, John Turner was our prime minister, but he had previously been a cabinet minister and an MP. And there was another one back during the Second World War where it had been previously a senator. So people who had been familiar with the parliamentary precinct and had been elected and or sat their butts in one of those houses, either House of Commons or the Senate. But now, Mark Carney, because he was selected leader by the Liberal Party of Canada, and because the Liberal Party of Canada is currently the governing party of Canada, bingo, bango, he automatically becomes prime minister. And this is the tricky part. So this is the part, because we're a constitutional monarchy, right? So in order to be a cabinet minister, you don't need to be a member of parliament. It's rare, but you can be asked to be a cabinet minister. The prime minister is literally first minister of the cabinet who swears loyalty to His Majesty King Charles III. So this is exactly what just went down like a couple minutes ago at Rideau Hall. Our Governor General, who's the representative of King Charles III, swore them in, and now they've signed the documents, and now Mark Carney is the prime minister. And the few things are kind of up in the air right now from the taxpayers' perspective, Tom. One, he said he would get rid of the consumer carbon tax, which I'll just take a moment, is a big deal, because as taxpayers and all of our supporters, we've been fighting this thing like crazy for 6 straight years. So to have the dude...
Just remind everybody, the last time you were on the show, we talked about this very issue. So for people who want to get some more background on this, you should go back to listen to the last time Kris was on. I'll have that link in the show notes.
Awesome, thank you. So the carbon tax is basically a tax on everything, because it made gasoline and diesel and propane and natural gas cost more. And of course, you layer that based on our modern current economy, and it becomes a layer cake from hell. And that makes everything cost more, and it brutalizes people as far as affordability goes. So for him to say, I'm going to get rid of the consumer carbon tax, is a win. However, devil's always in the details. This guy, Mark Carney, has been a carbon tax cheerleader his entire professional life. Okay, he wrote a book called Values that has the planet Earth on the front of it with scaffolding around it. and he wrote it. The carbon tax is a keystone to his worldview. So for him to say I'm getting rid of the carbon tax is like a vegan ordering a steak. You're just waiting to watch him choke that down. And
Right.
frankly, I'm following him to, the can to make sure he doesn't yak it back up again. Sorry to, be gross. But
No, that's
this is
fine.
where we're
This is
at.
my podcast. You're allowed to be as gross as you want, please. And
I figured,
it's
right?
actively encouraged, to be honest with you.
So this is where we're at. So we're hopeful that yes, he'll get rid of the consumer carbon tax, but the big scary thing here is that we're worried after this great win for taxpayers and Canadians that he's going to nail us with the industrial hidden carbon tax, which is crazy expensive. We just won't be able to see where the punishment is coming from. And if we tax Canadian industry, I don't know if you've heard of him, but there's this guy named President Donald Trump who's trying to get manufacturers and industries to move to America.
Right.
We're going to chase those fertilizer plants and the steel manufacturers right into his arms, like galloping towards Michigan and Ohio. So I'm really worried for Canada right now.
You should be, because what's funny is whenever there's this kind of globalist coup against a particular country that's important, you see the same thing, and it's pretty much been the playbook to roll up all the Commonwealth nations, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and now Canada, one by one. And financially, I think they're being economically strip mined. I think they're just being strip mined. I said this, when Liz Truss and Queen Elizabeth were removed from office back in September of 2022. I said, and they installed Rishi Sunak. And I said, well, he's as Davos as they come. And his role now will be to start the process of liquidating the UK and make sure that it's gasping and on its knees, getting ready for whatever it is that they have coming next. But they needed to ensure that first, that Sunak not only sold out all of the United Kingdom, but also destroyed the Tories at the same time, in order to make sure that when they installed Keir Stalin, as my friend Crypto Rich likes to call him, that he would have a supermajority in the British Parliament, in order to ensure that they can do anything they wanted. And that's exactly what they're doing. And that's why we're getting the push for global war. That's what Carney's for. And I'm not surprised by this at all. It was funny. I was talking with our mutual friend Sean Newman about this the other day. And Sean just looked at me and said, dude, I didn't even know who he was. The guy wasn't even living in the United States. I'm like, I know. Like, the last time I remember Mark Carney, I remember when he was the head of the Bank of Canada. Then he moved over to the head of the Bank of England. And now he's Prime Minister of Canada. Well, it's the same thing that they did to Italy, when Italy was trying to get. And now that I think about it right now, this is really interesting. This just popped into my head, so I apologize for hogging the microphone.
No, it's bad. No. I listen to your stuff. It's good.
Yeah. So what I'm going to say here is, do you remember back when there was the potential for a governing coalition in Italy, when the populists first, when M5S and Lega got together, and eventually that coalition had to be broken apart. First, they went after Matteo Salvini, then they destroyed Luigi Di Maio, and eventually they got what they wanted, which is they put Matteo Renzi and the deep state back in power. And then eventually they chose Mario Draghi, the former president of the ECB, to be caretaker prime minister of a technocratic government in Italy until they ran out of time, until the next elections. Well, I guess what they're doing the exact same thing here with Mark Carney. It's clear that the election of Donald Trump accelerated some kind of time schedule here. And I don't even know if Trump and Justin Trudeau, who nobody likes, and didn't cut a deal in order to actually save Canada. And now then at some point they had to insert Carney into the process, because there was the possibility that Trump was actually going to cleave Canada away from this EU SSR that's forming very rapidly, by the way. They're accelerating their plans very quickly now. And so it makes perfect sense to me that they would respond exactly the same way that they did in Italy with Canada, because Canada is a very important point of contention, for a pressure point for them from their perspective, in order to try and stop the United States from doing what we're doing, which is declaring independence against the globalist order. So that's the way I think I'm beginning to read this. Now, there's a lot of other attendant issues here, but I don't want to go I don't want to, we'll throw it back to you. So let's talk about the so let's talk about what you perceive here to be the big deal. Because I think Carney saying, look, we're going to get rid of the consumer carbon tax is nonsense. What he's doing is he's positioning himself for the general election that's coming up sometime within between now and October.
Yeah, and any second, really. So there is two minds going right now. One is that he's going to call an election immediately. So their word on the street is that it could be Monday. And in order to do that, again, the prime minister has so much power in Canada. It is an astonishing amount of power. He appoints the Senate, he appoints the judges, he gets to call the election. So Monday, we're hearing he's going to go back to Rideau Hall, where he is right now, and go to the representative of the Crown and say, hey, let's have an election. There's a few reasons why people think that's going to happen. One, the Liberals have a bump in the polls right now, and it's largely because of what's going on with U.S. President Donald Trump. It has completely revived the popularity of the Liberal Party. If this had gone on the way it was before, and if Trudeau had stayed in power, and if Trump hadn't said anything about 51st state type stuff, there would have likely, nobody can say forever because things happen during elections, okay, but likely it would have been a massive majority for the Conservative Party and Pierre Poilievre, their leader. Now, the polls look like they're pretty close again, suddenly. And so that's because when U.S. President Donald Trump says things like, hey, you're going to be our 51st state, or you're not a real country, or this is an imaginary line, kind of normal everyday people get freaked out by that. They don't find it funny. They don't see it as a joke. I personally, this isn't CTF policy, it's just my own analysis. I personally think it's part of his art of the deal, where you rough them up a little bit, destabilize them, and then you get to renegotiate your trade deal. Amazing how that works. That's how I read him, but nobody's asking me that. So this is a situation we're in right now. So this is why a lot of folks think that Carney could call it for two reasons. One, there's the really honorable reason in that he doesn't have a mandate from the people. So he's been selected. That would be a very good reason for him to call a general election, to say, you know what? Technically, I shouldn't really be here. So I'm going to put it out to the Canadian people. Do you want me to be prime minister? That is an earnest question. There's the other one, more cynical one, in that the Liberals are high in the polls right now, and this is their best shot to maintain power.
Yeah, to me that seems like the latter case is the real one, because Mark Carney is not an honorable man. Never has been, never will be, and why would you consider him to be to act that way? Now, I know that he can. And that's why he's gonna. And again, that ties into, well, we'll get rid of the carbon tax and elect me, and he can put on airs and illusions that he's the reasonable person. As always, look, the game is always let everybody else look at what's going on here. Right? Like ultimately, you have Doug Ford, the premier of Ontario being the guy, being the attack dog against Trump, right? You have all the others doing. You have the regional provincial ministers being out there, premiers being the guys fomenting this anti-Trump sentiment, while Carney just kind of doesn't say anything. Really hasn't said much, right? Other than we'll fight Trump. And so again, that just speaks to, I think, every point you just made, which is that and this is actually something that's I do want to talk to you about, and because America and Canada don't have cordial relations. We have thinly veiled hostility, and it's always been there, and you can see it in hockey. You can see it in the NHL. Right, you can see it in a lot of different ways. Americans don't really respect Canadians, and Canadians, frankly, we want to like each other, but we don't respect each other. Like this is an old thing that is being uncovered here really quickly, and I think Trump lit the fire on this to say, okay, so what are we dealing with here? Let's get rid of the bullshit. Like, are we really separate countries? If we are, okay, are we really separate people? All right, fine. Where are the breakpoints? And and I think that there's something very sincere there. And this is not to say, like, I got news for you. New Yorkers don't like Southerners. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is not
Sure,
like
there's divisions
we
everywhere.
have 14 different cultures in the United States, okay, who all don't like each other. Like, so this is nothing new. Like, so I'm prefacing this by saying this is not irreconcilable, but it's deeper seated, I think, than people understand, and it feeds into the perception of Trump derangement syndrome, and it's being used and amplified for cynical political purposes, which I think is what's going on here. What do you think?
There's a lot there. So to your point where, there's so much there. To your point where, people from Brooklyn generally don't like people from California, but not always, of course. But like there's so many divisions within the United States, like I don't consider Texas
more like
and
Queens in California, but yes. But just
nice.
As a New Yorker, I know the difference, but yes. Sorry.
You would. Okay. Thank you. No, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, sorry. Because in Brooklyn right now, after gentrification, though, they're all fucking aligned with each other, these people. They're awful.
So glad that we're connected again. Okay. I needed to talk to a friend outside of Canada today. I realize this now. Thank you. So here in Canada, I'm going to speak for myself. Here in Canada, there's the West. So it's Alberta, where I am right now, and Saskatchewan, where Sean usually is, Sean Newman, which is generally the resource sector. It's very similar, I would argue, to, say, Texas in the United States. In our own way, tons of cowboy culture. Lots of my family are literally bronc riders. Like, that's what we do. You get into, say, right, exactly. That's brave. So you get into the Quebec-Windsor corridor, as we often call it, which is Eastern Canada. So from Quebec City down to Windsor, which is, of course, across the border from Detroit. So that's more... You would have called that the Upper Canada, the Establishment Canada. There's even a book called The Canadian Establishment, which lists all of the original founding families of Canada. And so that's very kind of Eastern based. And I think, speaking personally, a lot of this kind of anti-Americanism-ish stuff, where it's just kind of latent, it's always in the background, like you were describing, that often comes from there. And I don't like it because, to me, as a Canadian, I think we should be able to define ourselves. We should put on our big girl pants and be able to reach into our own history with our own knowledge and our own achievements and our own aspirations and define ourselves. Instead of, as now I get to say former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, when he asked, what is it to be Canadian? And he said, well, we're not Americans. That's so lame. Like, Americans, like, if you were asked, imagine if you were asked, what's it like to be an American? And you say something like, well, we're not Mexicans.
Or like, we're not Europeans.
That's so odd.
That's not the first thing that comes to mind when I say I'm an
American.
No,
it may be down on the list, but it wouldn't be the first thing that pops out of your mouth.
Exactly.
Right? And so this is where I would say there's a difference. And that's why you would see more support or empathy or whatever for small A Americans. Okay. Not necessarily the rules or dictates coming out of Washington, but Americans like you and I talking right now, you'd see more affection, I would say, generally in the West than you do in the East in Canada. And so it's not only giving the Liberals a boost, it's riling up regional tensions in Canada, like big time. I literally hear it being talked about in the grocery store. It is
okay. No, go expound on that. I want to hear more of that because that's really interesting. And then I'm going to ask you, and then after you do that, I want to do, or actually in that same answer, can you define for me the term the Laurentian elites? I've heard it many times. I just want to make sure that everybody understands because I know it's a very important part of this conversation.
Beautiful. Okay, so number one, in the grocery store, this was just after the tariffs were announced, et cetera, and there was this whole kind of Team Canada thing going on. And again, to be clear, I'm against tariffs. Tariffs are just trade taxes. We think that they're bad for both sides of the border, and they almost always just hurt working normal people. And often the power brokers don't feel it. I hate it when people lose their jobs and they have to pay more for stuff. So generally speaking, bad idea. So that said, I was at the grocery store just a few weeks ago when this was all first announced, minding my own business. Again, I'm in Southern Alberta. Okay. You don't get more small government, freedom-oriented, gun-only type pickup truck than here. Okay. I'm in the epicenter. Still, though, I'm in the grocery store. I grabbed some tomatoes and I'm looking at them and I'm thinking of buying them. And this lady comes up to me and she had this look on her face. And I didn't quite understand what it was because we're past the lockdowns, right? But it sure looked familiar. And she hands me these tomatoes, and they actually looked good. They were grown in the greenhouse. She goes, "Oh, here, these ones are on sale." I'm like, "Thanks." She was a woman about my age. Sometimes we do this for each other. And as she's walking away, she turns to me and says, "These ones are grown in Canada. Those ones are from the States." And somebody behind me, another Albertan, said, "Are we really doing this? Like, are we doing this where we're interrupting strangers at a grocery store and we're like getting in their decisions and grill again?" And that almost never happens. Like, usually people are really chill around here and they don't, unless they're saying, "How's it going?" They don't interfere with what your purchasing choices. They don't talk to each other generally. They're just friendly and chill. But that to me is an indicator that if it's bubbling up here, I can't imagine how much it's at a froth rate in the Laurentians. And again, when we start amping up language like this and they start like that 50% tariff threat coming from US President Trump on our metals when they were having that war of words with Premier Ford, that's frightening for people. Like, that is job losing level stuff. And that's not a good thing. This is why I'm upset about it. To your point on the Laurentians are literally, or they're rolling hills in Quebec. So, and in a little tiny bit across the border in Ontario. Ontario and Quebec, the two big provinces in Canada, are separated by a river. You go across the river from Ottawa, right where our capital is, and you're in Gatineau, which is basically the French chunk of the National Capital Region. Drive a little bit further, you're in the Laurentians. So when you hear people say the Laurentian elite, they mean the ruling elite power class in Canada. I don't know what you guys would call it. Would it be inside the Beltway? Would that be the term? Okay, that's what they mean. And so people might remember the term Meech Lake, the Meech Lake Accord. That was something that we were having an argument with Quebec over language rights and whether or not they should stay in Canada. Meech Lake is literally a lake in the Laurentians where they were meeting. So that's the area. It's kind of a combination, I would say, of being at Camp David and inside the Beltway. It's those two things combined.
Now, interesting. That helps define it for me. I kind of understood it from reference, right? But I wanted to get it explicitly explained, and I think it's important that people have a good, explicit definition of what y'all mean by that. And I'm using the word y'all on purpose here.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It typically means old money, establishment, Canada, bilingual government.
Yeah, it's in some ways it's almost like it's like the difference between Queens and the Hamptons, and there's a difference between Long Island and the Hamptons. To be honest with you, Nassau and Suffolk County are one thing, but then there's the Hamptons, right?
Okay,
which is all outside of New York City. Right, because Queens is a borough in New York City, but Long Island is kind of middle class. So you're talking about places like Massapequa and Montauk and shit like that, and like those people are not, Levittown. And that's just those are the people that they lived and worked in the city. They were all lower middle class in the 50s and the 60s, and they're the ones who helped build, the post-war, New York into what it was. And they're the cops and the firemen and everything else. That's where some part of my family comes from. As a matter of fact, I actually was born in Freeport, which is just outside of Queens, and technically in Nassau County. So, but then there's the Hamptons, which is where all of the Manhattanites go and spend their winters. They spend that's their vacation areas. It's where all the big mansions are and everything else, and that's where a lot of very important decisions get made outside of prime.
Got it.
Same thing.
Is it where's Valhalla in relation to the Hamptons?
I have no idea.
Ayn Rand's grave. Okay.
No idea. So
it's beautiful.
But yeah,
I went to Ayn Rand's grave out there.
As we do the geographic regional breakdown of both Canada and the United States, I'm not sure that I know it's important actually at a certain level to talk about these things this way, because what you're uncovering now is there isn't one Canadian mindset. There isn't one American mindset on any of this stuff. It is very much always with our elites that run both countries, which, by the way, map back to old freaking Europe, unfortunately.
Big time. No, I think it's actually really important to map this out.
No, it is. It's incredibly important to understand that divide. It's a divide and rule play, and it's their agents domestically working for offshore powers to create a divide and rule between between the middle classes. And it's especially, I think, real here in the United States. The more I think about it, because of the way the middle class it exists in the United States, there's a lot more class mobility in the U.S. Than, of course, there is in Europe, and because of that, there's a lot of anxiety. In the middle class in America is rife with anxiety, not just because we're we're taxed to death and we're all losing our minds, but it's always been this because a lot of them came from being poor. And the
Yes,
middle
and we
class in
remember what it's
America,
like.
yeah, and the middle class in
Yeah.
America in particular, because it's such a fluid and dynamic system, um, you can go from middle class to lower class pretty
Sure
freaking
can.
fast in America.
Yep.
And the whole system that's been erected around us against our will, I might add. This is go with me here for a minute because I think it's
Yeah,
important. It's
no, no, I
indicative.
love it.
It's indicative of where Trump derangement syndrome comes from. And I want to get the Canadian version of this in just a minute, but that anxiety, the more the system has been designed to tax and destroy the middle class and heighten the anxiety of class mobility, the more it is generating the fear that anybody that upsets the apple cart of that system, they bought into a lot of people in the middle class had to buy into that system because it was very aspirational for them. Now all of a sudden they could look and they could say, we could afford the finer things in life, and all the finer things in life in their minds has been sold to them came from Europe. That nothing American is fine. Everything in America is crude and crass, and it's all football and crappy beer and NASCAR and guns and all. And you listen to these people talk, and that's what you get. And they have unbelievable disdain for what you would call high proles. And high
Yeah, yeah.
proles and high proles are the plumbers and the electricians and the contractors who all drive around $75,000, King Ranch Ford F-150s, making 250 grand a year. No one would ever know it, right? They make more money than
Nope.
all the middle class, HR Karens and all and university administrators and whatnot, and adjunct professors and all that. They all make 60 grand a year, and they can't make ends meet, and they live with their 14 cats. That's real. That disdain between those two cultures in the United States is really incredibly real. And it is the source of the divide and rule. That's what they're constantly pressing that divide on within the United States. And now it's being transferred across the border because no, I think it's being transferred across the border into Canada, and now we're trying to create an alignment between those same types of people in Canada and the United States against the evil Trump. That's what I think is going on.
What you nailed there. So I think about class a lot because I was raised working class. All of my brothers are tradesmen. Like,
Me too.
yeah. And I've
Dad was
I've
a cop,
got
mom was a nurse. Like this is not,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Like, yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Mom was literally a nurse and dad was a laborer. Like, yes. Like I said, my one brother's he's a drywaller there just outside of Ottawa. The other one's a mechanic. The boilermaker, he died suddenly 2 years ago of a massive heart attack. So this is how I grew up. But I've got tons of other family who have gone all the way through university and they've got lots of paper. But what you put your finger on there is something I hadn't thought of. And it's something I appreciate because I get that whole fear of insecurity, of suddenly going from middle class back down to fighting for every mouthful, working class, real fast. J.D. Vance describes this painfully in his book, like beautifully. So I feel him. So, but what you nailed there, Tom, is the underlying anxiety and the fear base that would cause people to kind of run in a crowd and maybe not think super rationally about things, because that's when you don't make super great decisions. Like in rare moments of fight or flight, like the bear is going to eat you, sure, panic helps you climb the tree or whatever. But most of the time when you're sitting in your house trying to figure stuff out, if you're in a state of panic, that you usually don't make great choices. So if you boil that down to kind of a more dispersed sense of anxiety throughout a class, say one that does not work with its hands, It is not a hard trade. You cannot see the product of your work every day. You start getting insecure, especially if you don't come from money, especially if you can remember those macaroni salads that had to last a week in the fridge.
That's right. Yeah,
You
no,
nailed it.
this is
That's
exactly
really
right.
insightful.
And
Yeah. Thank
you
you.
know, and I'll tell you, I'm second generation Italian immigrant, right? My family's been here for over a century, right?
Nice.
So, but I'm the youngest of four, of the youngest of 11. My dad, I was my dad was 40 when I was born. He was born in
Wow.
28. So I would go to my grandparents' house. I knew my great grandparents who came over. Like my grandfather came over when he was 6 years old, right? So you go to my grandparents' house, and I read a book a long, long time ago about this, and there was this anxiety within the middle, what he called the middle class. It was a book by Paul Fussell. I just found it on Grok this morning because I remember reading it and then I couldn't remember the name of it. It's a book about class in America. I remember him, saying like the middle class is terrified that anybody would ever find out that they didn't come from money. And I remember and he described literally like this is where you get the immigrant families with plastic on the furniture.
Bingo.
Because the
Thank
one
you.
couch they ever buy, or they ever think they can afford, they can't afford to have it wear out. So they encase it in plastic. And and I remember my grandmother literally saying to me many times, never let them know that you're poor.
Yeah.
Ever. That was the worst thing that could happen to her. And they were poor. My grandfather was a bricklayer. He ran a masonry supply shop on Northern Boulevard.
Yeah.
This is like, it's real, right? For these people.
And you probably drive past when you visit up there. You don't know
Well,
all
not
of them,
anymore.
but
He
you
had to
probably
sell it. Actually, he had to sell the entire business at 70 years old because he was forced to sell his business and everything because of Social Security at 70. He was still working at 70 years old. He was
wow.
still out laying brick and he
What
was
I
still out
mean is
running a business at 70 years old.
there are still bricks laid somewhere because of his work. This is what I'm saying. And that mentally, like I'm very biased because I'm from working class, so I don't know any other way to look at it. But being able to point to something that you made, you fixed, you constructed, it is there. It physically is there. Like Ayn Rand would say, A is A. A thing is itself. There it is. It grounds you in such a way that you can't really describe. And you really nailed it with the anxiety and the plastic on the furniture is so true. It's so similar. Like my grandmother wouldn't let us touch certain plates. Like we were never allowed to touch them. Like it was as if she was waiting for one day Her Majesty the Queen to come to her dining room, and it better be ready. It better be ready for her because that's it. And this is where it gets sad because you start thinking, okay, unpack that a little bit. That means that you don't value your own work and your own day-to-day life enough to give yourself the China setting. Even at Christmas, you're waiting for the other to come and be worthy of it. And
Speaking
so
speaking
wow,
of
man.
Christmas in my house, it was the only time we ever got to use the living room upstairs. So I grew up in an 1,800 square foot what we call the basic bi-level a house in upstate New York, and the living room was at the top. So the front entrance was between the basement, and was a landing between the basement and the main floor of the house. And you walked up, and then off to your right was the living room and the dining room, and then straight ahead was the kitchen, and then there were bedrooms off to your left, and then downstairs was the basement. Well, we finished the basement out, right, because we weren't allowed to use the living room other than for Christmas. That's where the tree went, and we only had dinner in the dining room on holidays.
Amazing.
It was a museum.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
We had a piano, not that anybody played it, right? We had a piano in the house because that's what middle class people have. That's what aspirational people have. And then we all lived downstairs in the basement.
Did you have a huge encyclopedia set too?
And worse than that, finished one of the 2-car garages that would, the car house had an integral 2-car garage. We finished one of those off into another room.
Wow.
Yeah, like the whole psychology of the house was we lived in the basement.
Because you were still the help.
Yes.
That's amazing. I had never dawned this had never dawned on me before. So on the eastern seaboard of Canada, they'll often call that room the front room.
Right.
In Ontario, typically, not always, they'll call it the sitting room, but you don't get to go sit in it.
Mm-hmm. No, it's this fucking museum that that you put all the nice stuff in.
Yeah,
And the
my
truth of the
grandmother's
matter is
porcelain
that the
doll.
stuff that was in there wasn't all that nice anyway. But it was the best we could afford.
Of course, all amazing. Well, you really connected again. I've given this a lot of thought, but I had never made the connection between this. And again, there are legitimate gripes that I have with, Trump's plan on tariffs and all that stuff because it hurts people, blah, 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 blah. And I also wonder, is this the best way to raise money instead of taxes? I don't know. I'll leave that for super smart economists to figure out. Fair enough. But the fear, the rampant fear that takes hold of some folks when they're talking about what's going on right now, I could never quite put my finger on it. And I think you connected it there. It's because of the underlying fear of loss, of losing money, losing prestige, losing status, because they remember back then in their maybe even ancestral memory what it's like to go all the way back down and to be clipping coupons for canned tuna. So I wonder if there's a way to dispel that and to reinforce it.
There is, and that is you have to get through it and come out the other side. I remember my dad understood like what was happening with Reagan. I remember Reagan. I remember that. I remember the bitter divisions between himself and his older daughters. Like, so I'm the youngest of four. My daughters are boomers. They're 11 and 12 years older than I am. They're on Social Security.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
My brother splits the difference. He's 5 years older than I am, and then there's me. So I was born in '68. He was born in '63. The two girls were born, 57 and 58 or whatever. So there was a fundamental difference and divide, especially during the Reagan years in my household, because my dad was like, "No, this has to happen. The United States is trending this is absolutely wrong direction that we're happening." So he was ecstatic about what happened, and he understood in his own way, the opportunity that was in front of him, and it was during those years that they were able to, finally put a little bit of wealth together after all the kids were out of the house. But we're running into the same thing now. Is that there's this moment where people are they understand this is it. We don't have any more time. If we do this wrong here, it's over. And what Trump is trying to sell to everyone with this golden age talk and all the rest of it is like he's actually literally trying to say to them, no, we can do this. This is what he's supposed to do. He's the leader. He's supposed to take a father figure, and a father figure is not supposed to tell you that he's got that he's not supposed to be your friend. He's supposed to tell you, no, you can go do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. You go out there and be brave. You're capable of it. I trust you. I approve of who you've become. Go out and be brave. Right. And that's where, and even if you're going to be a person that I don't, necessarily agree with, we'll go out there and be brave anyway. Because that bravery that you show now may bring you back to me at some point in the future or not.
And it makes you a better person and a stronger person. It changes your character for the good.
And so what he's trying to do is I think he's trying to change the national character. And in some ways he's making some short-term missteps with our relationship with Canada. But at the same time, what he's really saying to Canada is that, look, if you feel what we feel, here's your opportunity and we'll support you in this. Throw these people off. Don't be helpless.
Yeah. Yeah. So you see it then as kind of the strong medicine, very similar to the way that Reagan did back in the 80s. Okay. I hope it works out. It's caused, I must say, it leads the news here. So anybody that tunes in to mainstream media, it is the first 15 minutes pretty much each night of what is going on. Of course, because of the disparity of population size and economy, I can't imagine that it's top of the news in the United States. But it is absolutely top of the news in Canada.
What's top of the news in the United States is Trump is evil and needs to die.
Okay.
Okay, like this is not hard.
Because he's beating up on Canada? Or what's the reason?
It's not because he's beating up on Canada. It's because he refuses to go to war in Ukraine.
Right.
He refuses to do Europe's bidding. Again, this gets back into, think about the aspirational aspect of those people that I talked about earlier. Think about what they aspire to be. They aspire to something that's not crude and crass and new. They aspire to be something that's old. They
because it's
aspire to be
secure. It
British.
feels
They aspire
secure.
to be European. Culture is, oh, I get to drink French wines or whatever it is. And they don't, and like these are people that never drank wine in their entire life. They don't even know what good wine is, right? Or, so it's like, it's a weird thing where that's what they look towards. And that at the same time, they still have this depression era mindset of, scrimp every penny and clip every coupon.
Right, right.
And they don't know how to, they don't know how to enjoy themselves because they're so abjectly afraid of losing everything.
Constant state of vigilance. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
constant
What
hypervigilance. Yes.
do you think? So Danielle Smith is the premier of Alberta, where I
Mm-hmm.
live here. She has
Right.
taken a much different approach. One, to be fair, it's easier for her because she's a woman. So she
Yes.
can go down there, be diplomatic, and do the soft soap, do the smart thing, appeal to the governors. She went and visited Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Like, again, I'm not bashing the guys. It's just easier for women to be the soft diplomat and not look weak, right? If guys start trying to do that, they'll wind up looking weak and then they're going to get roasted. So it is a much tougher thing to go, I would imagine, mano a mano with Mr. Trump because you want to look strong, but you don't want to be too uppity that you're upstaging him. So that is a tricky teeter-totter. I know that the Ontario Premier, Doug Ford, he's just kind of a normal dude, right? He's very plain-spoken. I've spoken to him quite a few times. Very plain-spoken. His brother was quite beloved, the late Rob Ford. He had his own troubles. He was mayor of Toronto for a long time. People really liked him. His brother, Rob Ford, was known as the guy who would literally show up at your doorstep if you complained about a pothole and talk to you and give you his cell number and say, "Hey man, I'll fix it. I'll get it done." And he did. And he was loved like across the spectrum. That was his late brother. And so now he's just been reelected as Ontario Premier, Doug Ford. Danielle Smith is different in that she's very much, I would describe her as a small government, libertarian, aspirational, loves energy, oil and gas. She was a talk show host for a long time. And so she's been more soft power. I wanted to pick your brain on this. She's been meeting with governors, especially in the northern states, who use our oil sands oil in their refineries for fuel at the pumps. He's saying things like, do you really want it to be 30 cents more per gallon for fuel for your working men and women in America? Because that's what you're doing. If you're slapping a 10% or a higher tariff on my energy, why are you doing this? It seems to kind of be working. Do you see that working with Trump?
Well, I also know that Canadian Western Select is trading between $25 and $30 a barrel. And, that's a big problem for Canada. And
Mhm.
that's a big problem for Alberta because, the Laurentian elites helped ensure that there was no other marketable
Oh, yes.
possibility for Alberta to get their oil out to the West Coast, right? They put the kibosh on everything that was trying to be built out in British Columbia and Kitimat. Go back a decade. The LNG and export terminal that was supposed to be built out of Kitimat by Shell and others had to be destroyed. And since then, Canadian oil, Albertan oil, has been struggling since then.
Mhm.
And so to American refiners at this point, I'll be honest, like it's going to be a hard sell because the crack spreads are already so good. Like
Yeah.
especially if Trump
Yeah.
does away with the corn ethanol blending, which I keep beating my shoe on the table like Khrushchev about. Get rid of RINs, get rid of it, and allow the refine and build new refineries in the United States, and the refiners, will they're going to buy. They don't care if Canadian Western Select is $30 a barrel as opposed to 25. I mean, I'll
Because
be
they
honest with
still
you.
get a discount. Yeah.
It's still a massive discount over
Yeah.
any other domestic source of oil at this point. It's not that big a deal. That's the reality of the situation, and
All right.
I hate to say that. At least as now we change that, get that pipeline that goes from Alberta down to Ontario, which the Justin Trudeau and company put the kibosh on and open up Kitimat.
Oh, they killed it.
But the money's not there. No one's going to do
Right.
that certainly not with Mr. Carbon tax, the scaffolding around the world. Mark Carney is prime minister. So
No, no. Can I just point out really quick? I've read most of his book. So the
right? No, yeah,
chunk,
please.
especially on carbon tax. So this is again Mark Carney. He's our new prime. For folks who aren't watching the video, I'm tapping the book. That's the noise. So he's now the Prime Minister of Canada, and he just wrote this book like a couple years ago. Okay, I'm not cherry picking from stuff he said like back during a Friends episode in the 90s or something. Okay, so he states repeatedly in this book that 80% of oil and gas must stay in the ground. Again, 80% of oil and gas must stay in the ground. He thinks this because he wrote it in his book repeatedly. This guy is now the Prime Minister of Canada. There's one element in here too. Oh yeah, the other thing, this was huge. When he made his announcement about so-called getting rid of the wink wink consumer carbon tax, he also said he wants to create brand new carbon tax tariffs. Now, this is a big deal because this is how this works. So he's Prime Minister now. He looks around the world and he loves carbon taxes. He looks around the world and he finds a country that doesn't have a carbon tax. This upsets him. Okay. He was the special envoy to the United Nations on this topic for years. He sees this as a global thing. This upsets him that another country doesn't have a carbon tax, Tom. So to punish them, when they sell us widgets, the Americans, he's going to slap a carbon tax tariff on that object and make us Canucks, Canadians, pay more for it. This is brand new. We've never done this before. And he said this out loud with his face during his announcement to run for Prime Minister. This is another element I really wanted to flag for your listeners. And it's on page 233 of his book, Values. So he says to limit temperature increases to 1.5%, the average global citizen born today will have a personal carbon emissions budget over their lifetime equivalent to 1/8 of their grandparents. This is a big deal. Number one, I'm going to get in so much trouble for that one. Okay, dude. So personal carbon emissions budgets, he mentions this little moniker all the way through his book. Number one, what does he mean by that? Number two, how would he monitor what my personal carbon emissions budget is, or yours if you happen to live up here in Lethbridge with me? And number three, how would he then carrot and stick us into the right emissions budget behavior? These are all things we don't know. Right. Second, for him to say that someone born today will be allowed to have an emissions budget of 1/8 of their grandparents. So my husband and I's parents are boomers. Our kids' grandparents are boomers. He means that our kids can only be allotted 1/8 of the carbon budget that the boomers got. So he's envisioning just a drastic reduction in the use of oil, gas, natural gas, propane, anything that comes from oil products. So again, this is our Prime Minister. So we're pretty concerned about this.
Yeah, well, so when you bandy on numbers like that,
yeah,
then you have one of two options. As a math guy, I'm now going to play some math games. You have one of two options. If people want more than that budget, they want a higher budget than that. Well, then you have to get rid of the denominator. You have to make the denominator smaller so that we can have of the amount of oil. This implies an X amount of oil or carbon that can be utilized on an annualized basis. Well, you get that by dividing that by the number of people. Okay. So you can do one of two things. You can either say you can have 1/8 the amount that you would have had 60 years ago, 2 generations ago, or we can cut the population in half and you can have a quarter. Or we can cut the population by a factor of 4 and you can have half. Or we can cut the population by a factor of 8 and you can maintain the exact same lifestyle. This is another way of saying we want to destroy 8/9 or 7/8 of the people on the planet today, which is part of their agenda. Your choice. You can either live subsistence level and you all get to live, or you can live at the same rate with your iPhones and your grand dreams of whatever. And you have to decide amongst yourselves which one of your family members gets to live.
Amazing. So I don't see him mentioning population issues in this book, to be very journalistically clear. However, the of course not part is interesting. I have read current books that have been printed in the last 5 years that are still referencing the canard of the 1970s population bomb book. It is
Bingo.
astonishing. It is astonishing what kind of influence that book had. There are still people today who are referencing that thing.
Yep.
It is astonishing. And how they have not yet made the connection, the very simple connection, if you think about it from, frankly, a working class perspective, that once you have all of your bases covered, okay, you have a safe street, you have a decent school for your kid to go to, you've got food in the fridge, you have a steady job, and your roof isn't leaking. That's when you start thinking about, I'd like to save that tree down the street, or I actually do care about the spotted owl. You do start being concerned about the environment and the ecology around you once your basic needs are met. This is very simple. And we see this around the world. And so, of course, we won't have the same issue that they were fearing in the population bomb because they were just looking at it linearly. They weren't understanding the human psychology of uplift. And when you're feeling better, you make, wiser choices. And so this is where it's frustrating, is that this connection hasn't been made. And now he's saying things like, I want carbon tax tariffs. I want to crank up the industrial carbon tax and chase jobs away and really brutalize the economy. Just the other day, Tom, our parliamentary budget officer, which is an arm's reach, kind of a watchdog on the budget, came out with a report, something we all knew here in Alberta, that their plan to cap oil and gas in Alberta will blow a $20 billion hole in our economy. And for Canada, that's a really big hole.
Massive amount of money.
It's a huge amount, okay? Because we're so much smaller than you guys. Yeah. And it would slash 40,000 jobs. Just this one move, okay? We're not even talking about strangling the pipelines that were supposed to go east. We're not talking about the tanker bans or anything like that, all of which the Taxpayers Federation was fighting, okay? But now so much of this stuff is baked into this plan that it's making people pretty twitchy. And so again, this is why some people are kind of hot and cold on election now, so that we can get this over with and get a mandate. So it's pretty tough. Things are jumpy up here. I'll put it this way. Things are so jumpy up here with what is going on with the tariffs coming from the United States that my home province, where I was born, British Columbia, the West Coast, people might have skied at Whistler or something like that. That's BC, okay? Kind of looks like hobbits, like it's beautiful, it's mountains. Their premier just passed a sweeping law yesterday, basically saying I can do anything I want and not put it through the legislature because it benefits the economy because of Trump. Basically, I can do what I want. I don't need to consult the people who were elected here by voters, the people, as long as I can justify it using the economy. Long-time mainstream, calm, normal columnists. Okay, these people, they don't do podcasts. They are the normal sauce people in BC. They are saying this is unprecedented and this far away from the War Measures Act.
Yeah, that's great. That is insanely crazy. I want to just remind what Kris was talking about with the population bomb and all of that stuff is very, very real. These people are Malthusian in their thinking. You used the term linear earlier. It's very important. They take a short-term trend and then project it out into the future and then use it to fearmonger. This is everything they do. And it's the same thing with and they'll do it now with the tariff. Trump is literally arguing for, hey, why don't we lower the general tariff trend around the world? But in order to do so, we have to illuminate just what tariff structures are actually currently in place. Oh, by the way, the United States has the lowest tariff structure of any country in the world by far. And us, raising it slightly, honestly, is literally just, normalization, which I find really funny is that the same people who talk about, leveling the playing field in a tax sense, the OECD, tax harmonization, and all this stuff, it's always about bringing the United States down to everybody else's level, as opposed to bringing everybody else up to the United States level. Because again, we're talking about people who literally want to destroy most of the population of the earth. And this is why I'm going to tell you why I'm going to go back a couple of years now and why whoever it did that blew up the Georgia Guidestones was sending a message. The Georgia Guidestones were these things that were out in the middle of outside of Atlanta, I think, where the globalists laid out all of their plans. 500 billion people, this, that, all this stuff. And someone went out one day and just blew them the fuck up. And telling you that was almost like that was the shot across the bow. That was the shot heard around the world. In my idea, in my moment, I think.
Do you think they were? Do you think they were blown up because someone who values, freedom and liberty said?
I think they were blown up by the very people who declared war and put Trump in power.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I remember I've been arguing for nearly 4 years now that there has been a counter coup or a counter revolution happening in the United States, centered around Wall Street, the DOD, and rogue nationalist agents within the intelligence community. They're like, that's enough of this fucking shit, and we're going to take these people out. And this is how we're going to, and this is what we need to do. And yeah, we're going to put Trump back in power. And I've been arguing for that for 4 years. And I think the Georgia Guidestones thing, I think back on it now, was more significant than I gave credence to it back in when it occurred. So
you think it was like a starting gun?
Yeah. It was a definite like, oh, by the way, no, we're not doing this.
That's a lot of symbolism there too.
There is a lot of symbolism.
This has got nothing to do with the Taxpayers Federation, but do you mind if I ask you a question?
Sure.
What do you think about, I didn't get a chance to read about it. There's swatting going on with really high profile people on X, where I think it means like you call in a false thing about somebody's home, and then all of a sudden the SWAT team comes in. Yep. Like, do you think do you see that playing into what's going on right now?
Absolutely. There's a color revolution. The color revolution against the United States has begun. It's been going on for years, but it's now entered into the terminal stage where they're going to try and force a civil war on us. And it's going to be, and they're doing the same thing in Canada, Chris. What they're doing to you right now is the same thing. They are burning the society to the ground. They're literally saying, if we can't have Canada, no one can. And they're going to burn Europe to the ground. The United States refuses. What they're doing right now, they're attacking the stock market, they're attacking at every level. Go watch everything that happens right now is all Trump is destroying the world. So now we're swatting prominent members of the alternative space because they didn't win the elections, which they were going to send us all to Guantanamo. They're knocking off members of Alex Jones's crew. They're blowing up Teslas. They've turned the entire left now against Elon Musk. They've turned him into Elon Hitler or Adolf Musk. This is where we are. And the only good news about this is that now they're having to spend their own money as opposed to spending American taxpayer money. What we really have found out in the first 2 months of the Trump administration to date is how much the American taxpayer has been subsidizing the enslavement of the world on behalf of these evil people, and that money flow is being shut off. And then now they have to.
It's an astonishing amount of money.
It is.
We uncover a lot of misspending at the Taxpayers Federation. We're the ones that hand out those golden pig statues to bureaucrats who blow your money in the stupidest possible way. We've been uncovering it for a long time. And our version of this is Global Affairs, our Ministry of Global Affairs. Now, I know that vault of money is deeper and bigger than we even were sniffing at here. But yeah, we hand out ridiculous amounts of money to the dumbest things possible. I wanted to pick your brain about one more thing, and thank you for giving me your time. This is taxpayer related because we want an end to the tariffs because they are trade taxes, and we want people to prosper on both sides of the border. That's one of our goals here. My boss actually co-wrote an article about this for Town Hall. So usually we don't do that cross-border stuff, but like he feels strongly about this. With Doug Ford, the Ontario Premier, negotiating now directly with Trump's secretaries, to your point of what you just described, does signing on to like a Fortress North America with stable, steady energy flow between the two countries, really secure borders around North America, would that appeal to the Trump administration in light of what you just said?
That's like a true partnership. I think his plan, Chris.
Yeah, but with Doug Ford echoing that, do you think that's smart?
I think it's very interesting to see how quickly Doug Ford threw in the towel. Because the reality is that Trump said it yesterday. He said, "Look, Canada doesn't make any sense as a separate country. It operates better as a state. We can protect you better. We can take care of you." Like, I honestly, my initial thought on all of this when I saw Elon Musk go after Keir Stalin over um, in in the UK, and I quote my friend Crypto Rich for coining that term. Um, it became obvious to me that all of a sudden I understood Trump knows who the real enemy is. The real enemy is not Russia. The real enemy is not China. The real enemy is our allies. It's the UK, it's the European Union, and then Canada is being used as a pawn, is being used as a wedge issue. And what he immediately did was so they like to play divide and rule. We already talked about this. They're trying to do it still at the cultural level. That's why I'm like, no, you invite Danielle Smith to Alberta, right? You set Alberta and Western Canada, the economic engine of Canada, the real economic engine of Canada, where the collateral actually is, against the Laurentian elites. And then you target the job and the downstream, or you target the economic, the higher order goods that Canada produces for the United States, i.e. the cars. And
in
you
Ontario,
target that with
the
tariffs.
manufacturing in Ontario.
The manufacturing that was offshore. You target that while you schmooze the lower order goods, because what Europe needs is collateral. They can't get it from they need to atomize Russia in order to get that collateral, and they need to hold on to Canada in order to get that collateral. They need the uranium out of the Athabasca Basin up in Saskatchewan. They need the oil out of Alberta. They need the gold, the silver, all the metals, all of it. They need it all.
Potash.
And there's a lot of gold in Ontario as well. I've talked to a friend of mine who's from Toronto, a very based dude from Toronto, one of my patrons and now a longtime friend. And he's like, and he reminds me every time I talk about Canada to remind everybody that Toronto is not Ontario.
No, Northern Ontario is an entity all to itself, and it is full of metals. Yes,
right.
That is mining
and
land.
It's very important that he says all the time that the people of Northern Ontario, or outside of the Beltway, for a lack of a better term, that they have more in common with the people of Alberta than you might believe that the people of Alberta might believe. Right?
No, we know. Yeah, anybody who's raised working class knows that.
And this is something I don't know. Like he told me this. I'm now telling it to you, and you're telling me,
it's amazing.
You guys do understand.
No. And they've got one of the coolest sounding names of a city, Thunder Bay. Like, that's one of the coolest sounding names of a city. Come on, that is just bloody awesome.
And they produce wonderful hockey players out in Thunder Bay. I know I have studied. When I was a heavy hockey guy, I knew all about I started getting into Canadian junior hockey and then the different leagues and all of that. So I knew all of it because I had to talk, because I used to talk about the NHL as like I was a general manager. Like, how would you strategize the draft and this, like just like everybody else, like, so I could hang on Sean's old hockey podcast if I really needed to. I just don't know the players anymore because I haven't been involved in the NHL.
I used to know every backup goldtender and his wife's name. I don't know anymore. I know
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
We don't have casual interests. I understand.
No, exactly. So I get the religion, and I believe in Canada's religion. I believe hockey is one of the greatest sports ever created for a variety of and many reasons, which we can do an entire podcast on.
Yes, we can.
And I would be happy to do that one of these days. And I'd much rather have that conversation than this conversation, because this conversation.
Oh, I know.
Right, because that's about building things, about human achievement, as opposed to watching globalists try to destroy us all. But to that point, I think that what Trump is doing is he's doing the divide and rule play as well, and he needs to, because you have to turn their tactics on them. And I think intuitively Trump is very smart about all this, and it may backfire on him. I mean, and that is because we're in the middle of it right now. But at the same time, he's also making a pretty strong offer to Canadians. Look, do away with the tariffs. Let's have a good deal. Let's clean up the border. Let's clean up the drug labs and all the rest of it. Because to be honest with you, and I think he's very smart in doing this, tying the tariffs to cleaning up the fentanyl trade. Even if the fentanyl trade coming out of Canada is nothing compared to that of coming out of Mexico. That's not what's important. What's important is that he knows that Canada can't enforce that without the United States help militarily, intelligence-wise, and everything else. So the politicians in Ottawa and in Quebec, and they can't cash that check without his help. And that's the wedge issue. He can always just say, look, you're not helping us on fentanyl. I'm keeping the tariffs on until you guys really come to the table. And
there's the China factor there too. Right?
I know there is. Of course there is. And that's another thing about Fortress America.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. Fortress North America. Sorry.
Fortress North America. And to that point, if I can borrow a phrase, so this is not CTF policy, but we do want an end to this tariff war because, again, it's a trade tax war and it is hurting people. So we want to try to do our best to help. If I may, we've had our own issues between Quebec, which is our French-speaking province, as people know, and the rest of Canada, as it's referred to as. And there's been times where the province wanted to separate completely. Other people want to join France, et cetera, et cetera. So they have, a very distinct culture. There was something very smart that former Prime Minister Stephen Harper said once, and it just seemed to kind of balm the wound a little bit. And it's to my point with what's going on with Canada, the United States. Harper said that, how did he put this? Harper said, Quebec is a nation within a country. And that kind of dispelled the whole, it wasn't totally gone, but him saying that was one, true, because nation, birth, right? That's slightly different than the term country, okay? And it was true because it translates over to French as well. So when he said Quebec is a nation within the country of Canada, it kind of calmed stuff down. So if I may, if U.S. President Donald Trump said something like, Canada is a country within the continent of North America. Just the state word is the catchy word. Okay, it makes people wince and blink and bulk and like we've been our own distinct country for a long time. Okay, like a long time. Like my grandfathers bled, okay, in the wars, right, with a distinct country. So if he said something like Canada is a country within the continent of North America, and we're all going to have a big group hug here, that would turn the temperature down a lot.
Yes,
like a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But I think I'll be honest with you, to Trump's negotiating style.
He's just not going to do that.
Well, no, that's not true. That's not true.
Okay.
What he will do is he will do the thing to rip the Band-Aid off and to rip all the illusions off the table in order to get people to, okay, what do you really want? I've watched a lot of interviews with people who've been in the room with Trump in the last during his days as a New York developer and whatnot. A lot of people have described, they're like, I've been in the room with him. I watched him do this, and no one's better at this than Donald Trump. He has just a knack for this, which is he knows where the weakness is on the other side of the negotiating table. He always knows. He can read it. He can smell it. He's unbelievable at it. For whatever reason. I don't need to go into a big psychological history on Donald Trump, and I'm not going to do so. But he has that ability. And so he's sussed out Canada's real weakness. And now he's pushing on it. And he has to push on it in order to get out what really is the real issue. Like, what do you really want, Canadians? What do you really want? Because once I know what that is, we can negotiate on that. But if we're going to play around with, these other, these illusions, then no. And that's the way he operates. And eventually he's going to get you there. I don't know how he's going to do it. I just know that this is how Trump has done this. And he has a track record of pulling it off. That is quite good. I mean, he wins a lot more than he loses on using this style of negotiation. So what I would do is stop thinking about the moment, stop thinking about the ab reaction to his ridiculous rhetoric and start thinking about what it is you really want. Because if what you really want is a stable, prosperous North America, there's a deal to be made. And I think it's a great deal to be made. And it means Canada doesn't have to be a tariff zone, that it can be a free trade zone with the United States. And we can still put tariffs on the rest of the world. Because again, in order to fund the government. And then we have the bigger choice of staring us in the face. How do you want to fund our government? Do you want to fund it with tariffs, or do you want to fund it with income tax? Because at the end of the day, in order to pay for the government and the things that this is the question that's staring all of us in the face. All of us libertarians, all of us conservatives or libs, everybody, are all staring us in the face. The practicality of, we're going to have a government because we live in a dangerous world. It's practical. This is the world we got, not the world we want, whatever that world is, right? And because that world doesn't exist, how do we fund it? We can fund it with tariffs, and we can get rid of the income tax. And we can tame the central bank back to its original conception to provide a lender of last resort, facility for domestic corporate paper, which is what the Fed originally was designed for. Or we can have this globalist institution that sets monetary policy for the entire world. And I honestly think that Trump understands exactly what he wants to do. I think he's got a group of people around him that share that same vision. And now the question is, how do you flush out, do you really want to be ruled by Mark Carney? Because this is your choice. Do you want to be ruled by Mark Carney? Do you want to be ruled by carbon taxes? Okay, well, that's your choice. Here are the tariffs. Here's the thing. Call us when you've had enough pain. Because you can't win this. Right. You can't win a trade war with the United States. Europe can't win a trade war with the United States. Europe, the continent, can't win a trade war with the United States. Canada.
Can we hammer out a trade deal with the United States?
Yes.
To take the pressure off of this?
I firmly believe that's where all this is headed.
Okay. Because I think the tripping point is, as simple as it seems, I imagine, to Americans, of like, what's the big deal? We've always, thought of Canada as like, I guess our older sister that won't leave the attic upstairs. The word state is the tripping point here. Like, it's the triggering point up here.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference between becoming a state and having a trade deal with America. Mm-hmm. So if it is the latter, and we can just hammer
it's going to have to be a comprehensive trade and defense deal. And it means that Canada is going to have to give up its European aspirations, because Trump is divorcing us from Europe, because Europe is irretrievable. That's where this is going. Europe is going in a different direction. Europe is going towards war, and they're going towards, and they firmly believe that they can go to war with Russia and win. Okay. I have discussed this with too many people. I discussed this with Martin Armstrong yesterday for the last, and they inside the room, they really do believe that they can rearm and eventually, destroy Russia. And I'm like, really? Well, what happens if the United States and Russia get religion and to go and realize that they're better with each other than against each other? How does Europe survive that? And then Canada, what are you guys going to do?
That's so much has changed in 6 months. I can't stress enough. 6 months ago in Canada, this was not an issue. The Liberal government was on its way out. Mm. There was going to be a sea change in Parliament if the polls had stayed steady. I don't know what's happening now. And again, this tariff war is a massiff disruption.
I understand, huge. and I hope Trump plays it right. He may make a mistake here, Kris. I'm not disagreeing with you. That I hear that fear. I hear what you're saying. I don't know. I don't know if this is a big mistake or not. We'll find out.
Well, maybe they can do let's make a deal. So, and if they can do let's make a deal and have both men walk away from the table as winners, like just I've observed dudes in fights before, and if they can both walk away with their dignity intact, like I usually, as an observer, think that works out well. So in the meantime, we just got to keep pushing for cooler heads and a deal to happen here, like real quick, because I think we're getting a writ drop here on Monday. I think we're getting the election announced on Monday. Mark Carney is traveling to Europe first.
Yep.
And then we're probably going to have an election call. So.
Yep. And that could be a miscalculation on Trump's part. It could be. I don't know what to tell you.
We'll see.
All right, love. This was a great talk. We'll definitely do this again, and one of these days we'll do the culture talk. We'll talk about hockey, and we'll lament the fact that the Snyderverse is never coming back, and all the rest of it. So
he was going to make The Fountainhead into a movie.
Yes, I know.
Why? Where did that go? He had Quarry Productions and everything. We'll talk about it at Sean Newman's event. Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I look
Thanks,
forward
Tom.
to that conversation. You have a great time. You have a great day, and good luck. And let's hope that if the election is called, that Canadians get past their abreaction and don't elect the Dark Lord to, prime minister for the next 5 years.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Well, that'll about wrap it up for episode 210 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. I want to thank Kris Sims for a lively conversation. As always, it's always great fun and very illuminating talking to her about things, all things Canadian, as it were. And I think it's very important at this moment in time. You can follow her on X at Kris_Sims. And you can, of course, follow me on X at TFL1728. And you can check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/Gold, Goats, and Guns to sign up for the newsletter and or the market reports, as well as the blog over at goldgoatsandguns.com. You guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.